The second half of 1964 featured some more singles from the Rolling Stones and a second EP. To begin our discussion, I want to bring our consideration back to the one really bright spot from that summer American tour in 1964, and that was the opportunity for the Rolling Stones to record at the Chess Records studios, the Chess Studios in Chicago, and to get in there and record in the studio where some of their idols had recorded. In fact, at those sessions, I think they were there for 2 days. Muddy Waters and Willie Dixon actually came by and met the guys. There are some stories you're going to read about where one of the stories I read was attributed to Keith Richards, that they came into Chess Studios and they asked, is Muddy working? And they said, oh yeah, Muddy's in the studio. Oh, great, we get to see Muddy in the studio. And Muddy Waters was in the studio painting the studio because his career had fallen off. That probably didn't happen. What seems to have happened is on the second day of recording, Willie Dixon and Muddy Waters, maybe Chuck Berry, popped by the studio because they were in town, and Muddy Waters was real nice to the guys, helped them load their gear in, this kind of thing, so they got to meet the great Muddy Waters. That's probably the way that it came down. Let's just also put a pin in an idea here, that is that Leonard Chess, who owned Chess Records and helped develop this whole Chess legacy, has a son by the name of Marshall Chess, and Marshall Chess is going to come into our story a little bit later when we talk about the early 1970s when the Rolling Stones formed their own record label. It will be run by Marshall Chess. So this connection with Chess that begins in the summer of 1964 continues into the 1970s in an important kind of way. Well, so let's think about some of the songs that came out of that Chess recording thing in June. The next big hit, It's All Over Now, backed by Good Times, Bad Times, was released in June of 1964 in the UK. It's All Over Now went to #1 in the UK. When released in August of '64 in the United States, It's All Over Now went to number 26. Some of this was recorded at Chess, and some of this was recorded at Regent Sound in February of '64 by Bill Farley. Now, It's All Over Now, a song by Bobby and Shirley Womack, was released by a group called the Valentinos in 1964. And just to give you an idea how fast things used to be able to happen in the record business, this single was recommended to the Rolling Stones by Murray the K, the famous New York DJ, when they were in New York for that summer tour. He said, oh, here's a song I think you ought to do. It's called It's All Over Now by a group called the Valentinos. He gave them the record. Well, I don't know, they must have gone back to the hotel or whatever, but by the time they got to Chicago and Chess Studios, they were recording their version of the tune. That's an interesting one because the original version of the tune does not sound so country. But by the time the Stones get a hold of it, even though I think they're trying to do the song the way it is on the record, it really takes on a almost country flavor. And that country influence is something we're really going to want to watch as we go forward, especially with the Stones' original music. The other side of that record, Good Times, Bad Times, a B-side. Now another Jagger Richards original that we'll talk about a little bit later. And it's the first Jagger Richards song released by the Stones on a single. It's the second song released by the Stones overall. So this track here, in addition to Tell Me and Good Times, Bad Times, both of them being a sort of very big first Jagger Richards tunes released as singles. Now we move on to the next song, Tell Me, which we talked about before with regard to the first record, it being the sole original Jagger Richards tune. This song, Tell Me, was released in the U.S. in June of 1964. So it was released before Good Times, Bad Times. So I guess the right way to put it is Tell Me is an A-side released in June in the United States, and then Good Times, Bad Times is a B-side released in August of 1964 in the United States, although Good Times, Bad Times had been released as an A-side. Well, let's just think of them as both being original songs that were released in the summer and important original tunes for the Rolling Stones. Both Tell Me, the A-side, and I Just Want to Make Love to You, their cover of the Muddy Waters tune, were both on the first album. And Tell Me is a song that I'm going to, at the end of our lectures this week, I'm going to spend a little bit of time sort of delving into it in a little bit more detail, as well as Good Times, Bad Times. So I don't really want to say too much more about it. Tell Me was a single that was released in the US only. So Tell Me, an original Jagger Richards tune, was not released as a single in the UK. It was released in the US in June of 1964 at about the same time as the album was released. The first album was released in this country, and the same time as that tour. So you can see the coordination of having a single, an album, and a tour all going on in the US at the same time. The song made it to number 24 in the charts in the US. One of the reasons maybe why the group was not so interested in releasing Tell Me in the UK was because they had a new EP coming out in the UK called 5 by 5. And this is the one that really ties into the Chess recording sessions. It was released in August of 1964, and this EP 5 by 5 was never released in the US as an EP. Most of the tracks, all of the tracks, end up on the next Rolling Stones record, 12 by 5. But this 5 by 5 really is a document of their time at Chess Studios in June of 1964. It was recorded there in those studios, engineered by Ron Melo, who they would end up coming back to Chess Studios again to record, and working with Ron Melo there, produced by Andrew Oldham. The songs on that 5 by 5 album are If You Need Me, Empty Heart, 2120 South Michigan Avenue, Confessin' the Blues, Around and Around. We'll say a little bit more about those songs when we talk about the album 12.5, but all of those songs recorded at Chess Studios and captured on that British-only EP 5 by 5. Well, the next single released in the US in September of 1964 now goes to number 6. So a number 6 single for the Rolling Stones in the fall of '64. Remember this, that's the same fall in which they're going to come back again for a tour of the United States. They're going to appear on the Ed Sullivan Show. They play Time Is on My Side on Ed Sullivan, that performance, if I'm not mistaken, and also perform on the Tammy Show. So by the end of '64, things are really starting to pick up and starting to lead toward the massive success that they're going to see in this country, the United States that is, in 1965. So Time Is on My Side is that single. The B-side, Congratulations, another Jagger Richards piece. So when you think about the singles that we've talked about so far, let's think about that idea of how the publishing is going to work out. It's All Over Now is released. That's a cover version of the Bobby and Shirley Womack tune. But the B-side has got Good Times, Bad Times. That's a Jagger Richards tune. So they're getting publishing on that B-side. Then in the US, they released Tell Me. Well, that's a Jagger Richards song, so they're getting publishing on that. The B-side is a Muddy Waters tune, I Just Want to Make Love to You. The next one is their cover of Time Is on My Side. That's a cover version, but Congratulations, a Jagger Richards song, is on the B-side, so they're getting publishing on that. So this is, I think, we're starting to see a pattern of trying to make sure they capitalize on the records that they're promoting, the records that they're supporting with their live performances, trying to make as much as they can of revenue. Remembering that in these days, every band was afraid that this gravy train could end any minute. The pop audience is fickle. You are the flavor of the month, maybe only the flavor of the week. You got to make hay while the sun shines, make as much money as you can in this business. The Beatles, the Stones, all those groups were basically saying maybe we'll be big for another year or two or something like that. Nobody had any idea that we'd be offering courses on these groups some 50 years later, and and they would still be selling records, and there would still be lots of money involved in their enterprises. They all kind of figured they'd have a couple of years maybe in the limelight, and then it would be over. So while you're doing that, you try to make as much as you possibly can. And that's kind of what's happening behind this strategy. So let's talk a little bit about Time Is on My Side. This is an interesting one because it was recorded twice, so there are actually two versions of the tune. One that was recorded at Regent Sound in June of '64, and another that was recorded at Chess Studios on that second American tour in November of 1964. The Oregon version is the London version, and that's the one that was released as a single. And the one that has the guitar intro, if you hear the guitar intro at the beginning, that's the Chicago version. That's the Chess version. So Time Is on My Side had been a song written by a guy by the name of Jerry Rogovny under the pen name Norman Mead. There's also a guy by the name of Jimmy Norman who gets songwriting credit for that. The Stones seem to have based their version on a version by Irma Thomas from 1963. It was the B-side to her song. The A-side of it was Baby Don't Come On With Me, and so Time Is on My Side was on the B-side. Again, this is a record that I think Andrew Loog Oldham was shopped to him, you know, and so this is one reason why a B-side from Irma Thomas, not a particularly well-known American pop singer, how a B-side from a singer like that ends up on being a Rolling Stones single, is because the song was shopped to the Stones because people knew they were looking for material. They weren't really known as authors of their own material. Most popular musicians at that time weren't. That's one of the things that Lennon McCartney and Dylan changed so much about rock music. At this time, most pop acts were looking for songs, and there were people who made it their job to shop those songs to artists. We'll say a little bit more about Congratulations in the song Close-Up at the end of this week, so I'll save my discussion of the Jagger Richards B-side for that discussion. Following at the end of the year in the UK, the Rolling Stones release the song Little Red Rooster, and that goes to #1 in the UK in November of 1964. So they've had a real run of hits in the UK in 64. 64 has been a very good year for the Rolling Stones in the UK, and things are looking an awful lot better for them in the US by the end of the year as well. Little Red Rooster is not released in the US, and I think it tells us a certain amount that they announced that they released Little Red Rooster in the UK only, and Time Is on My Side in the US only during the fall of 1964. Time Is on My Side is a song that was meant to be a moneymaker, a big hit for the group in the biggest music market in the world, the United States of America. That song, however, was not released as a single in the UK. In the UK, they did a version of a Howlin' Wolf song, Little Red Rooster, originally written by Willie Dixon. The song, you might think, was recorded at Chess Records, but in fact it was recorded at Regent in September of 1964, produced by Andrew Oldham, engineered by Bill Farley. But what's interesting about Little Red Rooster is it's one of those slow blues numbers the Rolling Stones don't rock up. They don't jack the tempo up. They don't do it high energy. They do it in a very slow, in fact, a very slow, subtle way. I think it's one of their best early blues recordings, Little Red Rooster. So why would they release a slow blues as a hit in the UK? And it's, you know, Bill Wyman and others have remarked, you know, that was a #1 hit in the UK. It tells you something about, you know, UK audiences. We could never have had a hit with a song like that in the United States. You know, #1 in the fall of '64. Why would they have released that instead of Time Is on My Side? Well, one reason might be, and I can't confirm this is only my observation, that the Rolling Stones were still interested in preserving the sense that there was still a dimension to the group that was authentic blues revivalists. They were still interested in letting their crowd in England know that they were still dedicated to the blues in a real sense, and not just in a rocked out commercial kind of sense as they were often being accused of. And so to have Little Red Rooster come out, a song that no record label would have said, hey, that's a good idea, right? It comes out, you know, they do it in this very kind of low-key, traditional blues kind of way, and it really sends a message out to their fans that we really still care about the blues, and we're going to show you by releasing this. Not something they would have done in the US, but something they did in the UK. The B-side of this one is a song called Off the Hook, and it's credited to Nanker Felch, and again, probably it's a reworking, although it's just kind of a relatively generic-y kind of blues tune, so who knows what it would be a reworking on. But the people over at Chess thought the title, Off the Hook, sounded a little bit too much like a song that Little Walter had done for Chess Records, written by Willie Dixon, called Off the Wall. So they actually came after the Rolling Stones for copyright infringement. Not actually for the song, because when you listen to the two songs together, you can't really tell what the influence would be, except that they're both blues tunes, But it's just that they called it Off the Hook, and the other one's called Off the Wall. So the Rolling Stones, being eager to maintain the positive relationship with Chess Records and everything, they made a deal. They worked the whole thing out. But it's just interesting that, again, we see that same strategy of putting, if they're going to put a cover on the A side, they put their own tune on the B side so that they get the publishing on that. One last thing to mention: the Stones would often get roped into sessions with Andrew's other artists, and so they sometimes would back other acts in the studio, like not under their own name. And one of them was a woman by the name of Cleo Silvestre, who did a song called To Know Him Is to Love Him, a song that had originally done by Phil Spector when he was with the group called the Teddy Bears in the late 50s, early 60s. In January of 1964, they did this. These recordings you can find around on the internet, YouTube, these kinds of things. But the great thing is, on the B side, they put the song called There Are But Five Rolling Stones. So an interesting little, trivia factoid with regard to the Stones being pressed into service. Well, let's move on to the second album, at least the second album in the United States for the Rolling Stones, and that's 12 by 5.